Hey guys, how you doing? Chris Frigo, Powerlifting, and in today's video I want to discuss the overhead press. Why it's such a fantastic exercise, why your anatomical structure might be making it hurt you more than help you. Check it out. Alright guys, in last week's video we discussed the coracoid process and how the insertion of the pec minor on it could contribute to downward rotation. We then discussed face pulls and how they can help you even out that imbalance by stressing upward rotation of the scapula. In this week's video, we are going to discuss overhead pressing and how the acromion articulates with the humerus and how that can affect your overhead press. Alright guys, so first off I want to discuss the positive aspects of the overhead press. While I will get into the meticulous in-depth anatomy lesson, probably tutorial later on, for now I just want to discuss the main points of the overhead press. Obviously it works the superior fibers, the clavicular head of the pectoralis major. It works your interior deltoid and your medial deltoid. It also works your triceps. As stabilizers, it works traps, your levator scapula, your TVA, your RA, your internal and external obliques, as well as even to some extent your external rotators as neutralizers to the internal rotation of the coracobrachialis. So I mean, as you can see, it works a lot of muscles. Not all of them are obviously prime movers or even synergists, but you know, it really requires a very stable and healthy shoulder to perform. And in this next section, I'm probably going to replay this video just so I can do some more narration. I will discuss how the anatomy of your shoulder, specifically your acromion process, how it articulates with your humerus, affects how well you can overhead press, or even if you can do it at all. Alright guys, so if you look in any anatomy textbook and you look at your shoulders, you'll notice a couple of interesting things. First off, the humerus fits into the glenoid cavity. Fits right there snug, right below the acromion, and lateral to the coracoid process. Now, well, first I should discuss what the coracoid process is. If you look at what the scapula bone is, it's basically a triangular bone, and on the posterior side of it, the scapular spine actually sticks out, and it extends all the way laterally to the end of your shoulder, where the acromion process extends and comes out to the anterior portion of your shoulder. And you can actually, if you want to, you can actually feel right along your clavicles and palpate that. You'll feel the AC joint, the acromioclavicular joint, and right below that you should feel a little notch inside there, which is the acromion. Now, what I want to discuss in this video was acromion types and how they affect overhead pressing. You've probably heard this before, but I thought I'd just let you guys know, just so you're not jumping into an exercise that could potentially be dangerous for you and your specific acromion type. Now, there are three types of acromions. Type 1, which is basically flat, and I will actually put pictures and later on show you how this can how this affects how the humerus glides through the the rotator cuff, because it's a ball and socket joint. Then there's type 2, which they call curved, is basically a circle, and it makes it glide very, very, very smoothly. And then the third type, which is most problematic in the point of this video, is called a hooked acromion. As you can imagine, it's called that because it is shaped like a hook. And this becomes problematic because it makes it so that the humerus can't glide properly in the shoulder socket. And what this will do is it makes so there isn't enough room for the tendon to properly be lubricated by the bursa of the rotator cuff. And what this does, it irritates them and makes them inflamed, and it causes a lot of shoulder pain. They call it shoulder impingement syndrome. And basically there is I'm not saying there's no cure for it, but other than RICE, which is rest, ice, compression, elevation, or surgery, there's really not much you can do. You'd probably just be better off doing landmine presses or incline presses, just flat bench press. Overhead pressing might not be such a good idea for you. Alright guys, now don't get me wrong, I love the overhead press. I absolutely love it. If you're looking at my Instagram, it's probably half the lifts I do is it's overhead pressing. You know, I would say it's probably my fourth most favorite exercise, you know, behind probably just farmer walks, deadlifts, and squats. So this is not an issue for me just hating on the overhead press. I absolutely love it, and for people with type 1 and type 2 acromions, I think it's a fantastic exercise. It's probably one of the best things you can do, especially if you bench press a lot. I mean, it's always a good change, and it can really help you push past plateaus. But, like I was saying in the video, I couldn't really show you because I had the video up, but the 3 types of acromions. Now, if you look, we're looking from what would be a lateral, what we would be looking at the shoulder laterally. So, from the outside. So, say this is your coracoid process where my thumb is bent right here. This is your acromion. There's 3 types. First type is flat. And if you look, this is your humerus. And what acromion type, what it affects is how your humerus, your upper arm bone, glides through and smoothly rolls along your acromion process. So if you look at the first type, flat, I mean, it's pretty simple. It gets caught a little bit, probably about right there, but for the most part, it's just a slight impingement. Curved, type 2, it's even better. There's very, very little impingement. People with type 2 acromions are usually very good overhead pressers. They usually don't have many problems overhead pressing. But type 3, that's where things get tricky. They call that hooked acromion. And as you can imagine, it's shaped like a hook. So every single time it rolls, it impinges right there. Now, like I said, there's really not much you can do about that. I'm not saying you have to completely eliminate overhead pressing if you have type 3 acromion. I personally have type 3 acromion, and I still overhead press fine with actually zero pain. But it really can limit what you can do, because, like I said, it'll really irritate and inflame your bursa and your tendon, and it causes a lot of pain, and actually it can really hurt your sleep, because that's probably the big symptom of shoulder impingement syndrome. It is pain while sleeping, so it may cause trouble falling asleep in the first place. Now, also, like I said, another option for that is surgery, where they go in and they basically poke holes in your acromion, and they look down into your rotator cuff to see how bad the impingement is. And one of the options they have is to shave off the anterior part of the acromion, and it does work, obviously, if you just use basic logic. I mean, if you had type 3 acromion and they shaved off that part, it would make it so it wouldn't get in the way and impinge it as much. But obviously surgery should never be the first option. Honestly, I would probably just say a better option would be to just not do overhead pressing. Like I said, I'm not saying you can't, because I'm living proof that you can, but it's probably not a good idea. Because, I mean, it's automatic impingement. I mean, no matter what, when you raise your arm over your head, it's going to be automatic impingement, no matter what. You can't stop it. There's always going to be a slight amount of impingement. But when it's type 3, it's pretty significant impingement. Now, another thing I mentioned in the video, which I haven't shown you yet, is basically how to find your acromion. Now, it takes a lot of practice to really figure out, just by feeling what type of acromion you have. You probably won't be able to do it now. Most people can't, especially if you have higher body fat percentage. But if you're not exactly sure where it is, even after looking at an anatomy textbook, palpating it always helps, which basically means finding a reference point by just feeling it. So if you look at how your clavicle is shaped, it's kind of shaped from, let's say it is a superior view, which would mean from above it. It's kind of shaped, it starts off like this, and then bends, and then has another bend in it. So if you look, you'll follow the bend backwards, forwards, and then there's one big bend backwards. And when it bends backwards like that, you'll feel a big bump right there. That is the AC joint. That big bump you feel. It's almost just in line, just before, and obviously above, so it's superior and just medial to, your armpit, the line of your armpit. So if you find that bump right there, actually for me it's right there, and just go slightly down, you feel like a little notch where you can actually push in and get under it. Now that is your Acromion process. What I would suggest, if you do experience a significant amount of impingement, I would suggest going to probably a doctor first and just getting x-rays to find out if it is an anatomy issue. Because if it's not, if it's not an anatomy issue, you really don't want to waste your time getting an MRI, which is much more expensive, only to find out that's just, not tear or anything, and it's just, due to muscular imbalances, because that's something you can easily correct. So yeah, like I said, I wouldn't necessarily say you can't overhead press at all. I would just be very wary of it, and my personal recommendation would be that you just avoid it until you at least find out what the problem is. Later on, I'll probably make a video discussing whether it actually is a muscular imbalance or if it is an anatomy issue, but for now I will just leave it with this. Alright, thank you. You see, Stalin had the right idea, man. It was just implemented wrong.